Good morning, everyone. Welcome back to the National Zero Waste Virtual Conference organized by the National Recycling Coalition. I'd like to welcome all attendees, speakers, sponsors, and exhibitors to this great event. I'm Gary Liss, and I'm on the board of the National Recycling Coalition and one of the co-chairs of the conference, along with Alec Cooley and Leslie Lukash. Wanted to see how many of you were here yesterday and learned something that will help you advance zero waste at your business or community. Well, I came up with a way for you to share that. Please share in the Q&A what was the most helpful message or models you heard about yesterday. Models of policies, programs, or facilities, and share those in a brief form, no more than a sentence or two, in the Q&A. And then that will help others remember those key points going forward and to share them with others. And then everyone use upvoting to highlight which of those messages or models were also particularly helpful to you. Again, do that in the Q&A, not the chat, and we'll be able to use the upvoting function and see which were the best messages or models that you heard about yesterday. As you know, the virtual conference is centered on a main theme each day, with yesterday's theme being zero waste businesses and campuses as well, and today's theme being zero waste communities. Tomorrow's theme is the National Recycling Congress, which is the first time in 12 years that NRC is holding this important event again. I'd like to get the slides going. Todd? Next slide. Next slide. So today's agenda is starting off on schedule at 8:30. 8:45, we go to zero waste community plans, have a break in the exhibit hall with table topics and networking again, just like yesterday. 10:30, I have a session on zero waste and climate change. 11, World Cleanup Day and Plastics in the Oceans. 11:15, Workers' Dignity, Environmental Justice, and Community Economic Development. 12:45 is when the sessions are over, and we'll be back in the exhibit hall, the floor, the main conference hall. There will also be a career fair going as well, and general networking. 2 o'clock, we close for the day, but the rooms will be open 24/7 through the end of December 3rd. So feel free to stay around talking with people, chatting with them, just like you would at a normal conference, and really take advantage of this opportunity to see all the great leaders of zero waste in the country and around the world. Next slide. We have a couple of housekeeping items we'd like to highlight to you. If you haven't done so already, you could watch the remote tips. Just look for the banner in the upper left-hand corner of your screen to watch a video demo. On submitting questions, I want to make sure that you do that in the Q&A block, not the chat box. Chat is more for internal discussions and general questions that can be answered by volunteers throughout the day. So for the Q&A, when you go there, you can see where it's circled. If you click on that little diamond-shaped triangle, that will upvote, that will record your like of a question that has been posed. The more likes that a question gets, the higher it is placed in the queue to be asked by the moderators of the participants. So upvoting is a really important function that it's important for you all to understand and use. And you can do that right now with the questions that are and comments that are coming in about what are the best things that were best messages that you heard yesterday, to learn more about what everyone else is hearing as really important. Right now, waste hierarchy is in the lead, and with redesign and reduce as the top tiers, and reuse comes after that. So proper waste infrastructure isn't more expensive if it's established during the architectural planning process. And I would say also, if you do focus on reduce first and redesigning, you're eliminating wasteful practices. So those are really key points to be considered. Next slide. If you're looking for help, you can do that by a variety of ways. You can find volunteers in the room by looking for their avatars with the conference logo, the little bullet of the National Zero Waste Conference in place of their photo. And if you hover your cursor over that avatar, their volunteer headline will come up with their name. You could also visit the help desk in the upper right table on the first floor. Please go there if you have any questions specifically. There'll be someone there throughout the conference. Or you could type volunteer into the chat box. There's a whole bunch of volunteers, 18 volunteers in total that are helping with the conference. We really appreciate all of them. And they're there to help you particularly navigate the remote program. Next slide. You can expand the presentation to full screen. For those who were here for the earlier training, Alec underscored this. You just click on the presentation when it's on the screen, that tile, and then you click on the 4-arrow symbol in the upper right corner of the tile. And that expands it to full screen. And if you want to go back, you just click on it, the 4 arrows again, and you go back to the smaller screen. Next slide. Jump banners are a great tool for going to different rooms. For the speakers, to go to the green room, there's a jump banner for that. There's an informal networking room, and there's a jump banner for going there. That's designed for continuing conversations during the presentation, just like you would at a normal conference. For example, if you were in the exhibit hall talking with an exhibitor and you needed to finish up something, you could jump over before we go into presentation mode to the networking room and continue the conversation over there, and then return to the main conference room by clicking the banner in the middle of the room display. Next slide. If you're really needing to take a break during the break time, particularly, we ask that you use the elevator to park your avatar at the upstairs floors. Floor 6, we find some people have been using as a quiet zone to be alone, to gather their thoughts, but not wanting to leave the whole remote system because they're concerned about getting back on with everything working, audio and video, etc. So if you can honor that today, we'll see how that works. It's a new idea for us. Floor 6, quiet zone. If people are at a table, please don't go over and just start chatting with them. Most importantly, what we found yesterday was some of the exhibitors and the table topic speakers weren't able to get to their tables because people were at the tables and they were all full. There's 6 seats at each table, and because they were all full, the exhibitors and table topic leaders weren't able to get to them. So if you're not there to have a discussion with the exhibitors or to be part of the table topics, if you can move to another location, that would be appreciated. That'll help keep the flow of the event going. So next slide. I'd like to thank our sponsors, Recology, Waxy, and Paincare as our platinum sponsors, our gold sponsors, the Recycling Partnership, Mattress Recycling Council, Strategic Materials, Zanker Recycling, Zero Waste Sonoma, Mobius Intelligent Systems, Green Mountain Technologies, and the California Resource Recovery Association. Next slide. We'd also like to thank all of our silver sponsors and bronze sponsors that you see on the screen. Next slide. We'd like to thank our partners, Northern California Recycling Association, CRRA, Zero Waste USA, Zero Waste International Alliance, U.S. Green Building Council, True Certification of Zero Waste Campus Council, and Cal Zero Waste. Next slide. And we'd like to thank, next slide. And we'd like to thank all our advisory committee on the previous slide. Advisory committee. These are all people that worked throughout the last 2 years to help make this conference a success. And next slide. I'd like to thank all the organizers, staff, speakers, and moderators, cooperating organizations, volunteers, table topic coordinators, and the table topic leaders, the NRC board of directors and attendees. All of you are what was required to make this conference a success. It's been a 2-year effort. We like to think of it as the beginning of how to move forward for the next 2 years, working more closely together on zero waste and higher waste diversion in your communities and businesses. Next slide. Now it's my pleasure to introduce Kira Stahl, the Chief Sustainability and Carbon Solutions Officer at the University of California at Berkeley. UC Berkeley was to host us in March in person, and we are grateful for their partnership and leadership on zero waste. Let's give a warm welcome to Kira Stahl. Toast her with your coffee or tea. Here's Kira.
Well, good morning and thank you. And I'll toast you with my morning coffee here on the West Coast. And thank you, Gary, and thank you to the conference organizers for inviting me back to the virtual conference. I wish you were here, but we do hope that sometime in the future we can bring you back to Berkeley in person and host you for this event. If you were here today, it would be a beautiful sunny day, about 60 degrees Fahrenheit. Sun is shining, there's a little bit of a breeze. We would be located on our main campus, about 174 acres is on our main campus, about 200 buildings, about 16 million square feet that we manage. And on a busy day, we would have about 56,000 people in our little campus city. So I hope you can kind of get the virtual picture of where we might be today, and I would be hosting you. But I'm glad to be here with all of you in this virtual space, and to give me a few minutes just to talk a little bit about UC Berkeley, University of California, Berkeley, and some of our zero waste highlights. I'm also just impressed with the breadth of timely topics that are being discussed here at the conference. I haven't had a chance to participate in all of the sessions, but it seems to be a very broad and represented coalition of people attending. And it's exactly this type of networking and sharing best practices that's so important to educational institutions like UC Berkeley, or Cal, as some of you may know it. And it's particularly important to our students, who are key drivers of innovation in the space of zero waste. I often share that students and waste reduction efforts help to birth our contemporary sustainability movement. In the 1990s, recycling programs in residence halls paved the way for the campus to form the Chancellor's Advisory Committee on Sustainability, which is still active today, 18 years later, and influenced a student movement that launched the University of California System-Wide Sustainable Practices Policy. Today, that policy covers all 10 UC campuses and our medical centers, impacts hundreds of thousands of people in California, and covers 11 topic areas, including climate action, clean energy, green buildings, and zero waste. Our recently published UC Berkeley Sustainability Plan expands these policy areas and includes intersectional strategies around academics, engagement, health and sustainability, and diversity, equity, and inclusion in sustainability. UC Berkeley has been at the forefront of higher education sustainability efforts for years and is now taking the lead on implementing new and ambitious zero waste policies and continuing to build up broad student, staff, and departmental support on campus. As a higher education institution focused on research, we also recognize our incredible opportunity to drive knowledge, experimentation, and learning for new generations of change makers. We are strongly committed to this mission, but also to being our best stewards of the resources and waste in our operations, to reducing that waste, to reusing, to supply chain strategies, improving our diversion rates, and eliminating single-use plastics from campus. I wanted to share a few of the highlights or points of pride. We do have a zero waste goal. We have a zero waste goal by 2020. We are working towards that. We established this goal in 2013, and it has driven waste-related work and conversations across the campus, from labs to athletics to academics. Cal Zero Waste, one of your conference hosts and our champion of zero waste at the Berkeley campus, has spearheaded efforts to roll out a green buildings program in which all campus buildings are fitted with standardized waste bins and signage to maximize proper waste sorting. In the last few years, Cal Zero Waste has partnered with Green Labs to pilot our Zero Waste Lab program that specifically focuses on reducing the waste generated in these labs. And one of our newest campus buildings earned a trifecta of green certifications, including Platinum True Waste. This certification effort is serving now as a model for our best practices in buildings. Just last spring, by student effort, we implemented the most aggressive single-use plastic elimination policy at an American institution. This policy now calls for us to eliminate all non-essential single-use plastic by 2030. The policy has been signed by the Chancellor of the Berkeley campus and spans 9 different sectors of plastic elimination, from plastics in labs, food service, office supplies, and more. Right now, a team of over a dozen students are collaborating with staff to create a 10-year roadmap that will help us achieve this goal. In the spring of 2019, students on campus established this coalition called the Zero Waste Coalition in an effort to improve communication and collaboration on zero waste related work across the campus. The coalition brings dozens of students together to discuss and collaborate on projects, works with administration and staff to streamline zero waste work on campus, and define the trajectory of our goals. Just this semester, over 1,500 students listened to presentations given at the beginning of their classes on Zoom about the importance of zero waste and environmental justice. These presentations kicked off an entire month of programming focused on zero waste and themes on the topic of earth justice. And finally, I wanted to share another student effort. It's called the Zero Waste Lab. It just started up this fall. This space on campus allows undergraduate students to build on past analysis and collaborate on research topics related to zero waste, giving them firsthand experience with conducting research and providing insight into strategies for the university to reach its target. And in the theme of today's conference, community, it certainly takes a village, and it takes a village at UC Berkeley to move our zero waste goals forward. It's a campus village. It consists of numerous partnerships. It consists of relationship building, and it consists of reaching out to our surrounding communities to find the best and most suitable solutions. We are all facing new challenges due to the pandemic. But we also have new opportunities as we recover from the pandemic to make significant shifts in our upstream and downstream waste policies and practices, and to embrace the term we use here at Berkeley, Zero Waste 2020 and beyond. Thank you for this opportunity, and have a wonderful and insightful day.
Thank you so much, Kira. Again, great to see the leadership from UC Berkeley, and we appreciate so much the partnership. Next time, maybe we'll be able to come back to Berkeley or do something else there. So again, thanks so much. I'd like to do a couple of shout outs to a couple of our sponsors, particular at this point. Waxy Sanitary Supply highlights that they're committed to being a leader in promoting responsible business practices, providing resources to help our customers in their recycling and waste diversion efforts, and working with others towards a more sustainable future. And Zanker Recycling indicates that they're the leading C&D construction demolition recycler in the San Francisco Bay Area. And they divert over 80% of all the material that they receive from landfilling. So when you go into the exhibit hall, please introduce yourselves to the exhibitors, ask them questions about what they do as far as their products and services, and thank them for helping to support the conference. We wouldn't be able to do this without them. Now I'm going to go on to our first panel. I'd like to introduce our moderator for that panel, Denise Patel. Denise is the U.S. Program Director and Regional Coordinator for the U.S.-Canada region at the Global Anti-Incinerator Alliance. She previously worked, otherwise known as Gaia. She previously worked on campaigns and policy development with labor, environmental, and environmental justice organizations on toxics and chemical safety, fossil fuel divestment, and climate change, with a focus on improving environmental and occupational health. And she's going to bring all those background and expertise into the zero waste world. So let's give a warm welcome to Denise. Here she is. Denise.
Thank you, Gary. And thank you to all of the conference organizers. It's been an amazing opportunity for us at Gaia to be able to participate in the National Zero Waste Conference and to be able to organize some of these wonderful panels with everybody. I want to welcome everyone as well for the day, and we're honored to be able to kick you off with this first panel. So as you know, if you're here and listening in, we're going to be talking about zero waste communities. Over 100 cities in the US have committed to shifting to zero waste systems. Cities have set goals such as achieving 90% diversion rates, citywide composting, and waste reduction, reuse, and recycling policies to build out those systems. But how are they doing it? And how can they achieve these goals and build systems that are just and equitable? Our panel today will discuss how to create and build zero waste plans, incorporating learnings from cities in Europe and the US that are putting their commitments into action through perspectives from communities, city program officers, and zero waste implementation experts. As experts in the field, we really see these as the beginning of organizing in communities across the US and globally. We hope that you will take the opportunity during the conference to foster new relationships with each other and take the steps to help build the movement towards achieving a truly circular economy. And as we come through what has been a remarkable year, both in difficulty and show of resilience, looking ahead before us to root the circular economy in justice, equity, and health, to build back not just better, but bolder and with ambition. We know these solutions begin from the bottom up, with communities, with workers, and with strong political leadership. It's not just about having the vision, but also having the tools to make that vision a reality. So in today's session, we're going to be honing in on a few of those things and those tools in particular. We're going to be talking about model zero waste master plans from the US and Europe. We're going to be looking at sample zero waste community plans, how to help your community get started doing zero waste community planning, policies and programs and infrastructure options for zero waste community plans, and then Zero Waste USA's Zero Waste Community Planning Checklist, which has been an incredible tool for lots of folks across the country, and talking about how zero waste lifestyles play a role in achieving all of these things. Joining me on the panel today, we had a presentation organized from Gaia's US team with Aditi Varshney. Unfortunately, she's not available to join us today, and I will be presenting for her first with our Zero Waste Master Plan. Following that presentation, we have Jack Mckibben. Jack is the Zero Waste Cities Program Coordinator at Zero Waste Europe, based in Brussels, Belgium. Jack is a young leader working in the field of sustainability and campaigning for several years now. After graduating in international relations from the University of Leicester, Jack has gone on to design and lead successful advocacy campaigns at the United Nations, European Union, and British Parliament levels. Jack leads the Zero Waste Cities program, which works with over 400 municipalities who have committed to become zero waste. He helps build and shape the program to best support local level implementation of waste prevention and reduction practices, and is designing the Zero Waste Europe Academy to become Europe's go-to platform for resources and expertise on designing community-focused zero waste strategies. Julie Sands-Tynes is going to be joining us as well. She has been with the City of San Diego's Environmental Service Department for about 18 years and is a supervising recycling specialist. Before ESD, she worked in environmental consulting on CEQA projects and Superfund sites, as well as for an English language newspaper in Paris, France. She currently oversees the commercial sector and special events programs, commercial food waste program, a local recycling processing facility, updates zero waste policies, 1383 plans, which I'm sure we're going to learn a little bit about if you're not familiar with those, as well as supervises a group of recycling specialists and their projects. As with most on the environmental team, she wears a variety of hats, as you can tell, don't we all? And she has a master's in environmental policy from the University of London and a BA in political science from SDSU. And finally, we'll have Portia Sinnott joining us, a zero waste advocate consultant. Portia enjoys leading and taking part in a variety of projects. Some of her past favorites include the UN Habitat Solid Waste Management in the World Cities program, US EPA's Managing and Transforming Waste Streams, and more recently, the Palo Alto Zero Waste Plan Update, and Mountain View Zero Waste Plan and Materials Characterization Study. As a Zero Waste USA program director, Portia develops zero waste courses, resources, and assessment tools, and conducts in-person and web trainings. So you'll see some of her skills on display today. In addition, she is co-founder and executive director of Zero Waste Action, Sonoma County, and manages Community Bikes, a collaborative reuse and repair shop in Santa Rosa. The former president of the Northern California Recycling Association, she has been with NCRA editor for about 10 years, or more than 10 years, and recently rejoined the board. On behalf of all of these groups, Portia collects data on zero waste initiatives, convenes brainstorms, large meetings, and a wide variety of projects focused on the transition to a world without waste. So I'm going to kick it off with our presentation from Gaia US. I wanted to make a quick note. We're going to be taking audience questions. For each presentation, I'm going to be looking at the Q&A section that's on your screen to see if there are questions for the panelists. We're going to have an opportunity to ask each panelist one or two questions right after they present. And then at the time, towards the end, if we have time for for more questions from the audience, we'll be taking those after all the presentations are complete. So please do use the Q&A feature. I'm going to be keeping an eye on that. Upvote the questions that you agree with and want to see asked of our panelists. It'll be truly helpful. So I'm going to begin. You can see, thank you, Todd, for putting the slides up. So for Gaia's US-Canada team, really excited to present our Zero Waste Master Plan. Over the past year, we have been diligently working with our community partners, experts in the zero waste field, and policymakers to develop a guide to building just and resilient zero waste cities, which we call the Zero Waste Master Plan. It is intended to be a one-stop shop for activists, policymakers, and sustainability professionals, filled with tools and strategies to lead cities into just and resilient zero waste futures. To develop the guide, we drew upon the collective wisdom of the expansive expansive Gaia Global Network and paid careful attention to needs and experiences of workers and environmental justice communities. In it, you will find best practices. You'll find case studies that are truly grounded in social and environmental justice with the ultimate goal of moving from an extractive economy to a regenerative economy. Researched just transition policies with union input to show how cities can ensure long-term employment for workers transitioning out of polluting infrastructure, and highlights of policies and practices that center access and equity to implementing zero waste programs, from technical support to small businesses to multilingual outreach to connecting to the need for safe, sustainable drinking water access. The guide is authored by Gaia's Zero Waste Communities Coordinator, Aditi Varshney, with significant contributions from Ruth Abbey and Portia Sinat of Zero Waste USA, and Alex Danovich with Nothing Left to Waste, and many others who contributed, reviewed, and provided powerful case studies. Next slide, please. Okay. If you haven't had a chance to watch our 4-minute video on our website, please do so. The video features one of our core partners in Baltimore, Shoshanda Campbell, telling the story of what developing zero waste systems would mean for her community. She envisions the potential for clean air, jobs, and a healthy local economy to replace a toxic incinerator, open dumping, and the economic extraction of her community. It walks through the connections between zero waste and building justice and equity for communities and workers in the context of climate change and growing inequality during the COVID pandemic. With the plan, video, and communications work, our messages for city leaders are that 1, zero waste stretches beyond recycling. It is an essential part of recovery. We need policies, programs, and infrastructure to minimize municipal waste streams and sustainably manage what's left. 2nd, cities can support local economic development and livelihoods, improve air quality, and mitigate change with zero waste solutions. 3rd, zero waste systems help cities save money to avoid disposal costs and healthcare costs associated with waste pollution. And 4th, building an environmental justice plan with zero waste is incomplete. Zero waste means environmental goals and holistic tools of social intervention towards well-being for all are incorporated into the planning. Next slide, please. So why zero waste? Well, we know zero waste programs create jobs. In fact, each step along the zero waste hierarchy, if fully achieved, creates more jobs than simply tossing trash into an incinerator or a landfill. Refill and reuse systems are an opportunity to create businesses and lift local economies. With recycling and composting, these systems improve local environments and mitigate climate emissions. But it won't all happen on its own. Cities have a responsibility to ensure waste creates and protects jobs for workers that pay family-sustaining wages and benefits and put human health first. In the guide, you will find some real-world examples of how these systems are operating in cities across the US. For example, as a nonprofit, mission-based recycler, EcoCycle in Boulder, Colorado, finds ways to recycle materials that are hard to recycle while employing individuals that would otherwise have difficulty finding work, such as individuals on the autism spectrum. We have also included a section for folks to learn how to read and write waste contracts, something that is useful for policymakers and any organizer wishing to change the system. Next slide, please. At Gaia, we are also well aware of the stumbling blocks that cities should avoid. These are the things that sound like waste solutions, but in reality create toxic pollution and climate emissions, like incineration, plastic to fuel, and landfilling, and waste solutions that should be utilized with caution. So in addition to lots of technical zero waste advice on what cities should do, the website and plan also identifies what cities shouldn't do. And each is described on the website and in full text. And you can see the little icons on that image that you could click on to learn more about all of those stumbling blocks. Next slide, please. As I noted earlier, we know zero waste systems aren't going to build themselves. And though we have some great leadership in a few cities, we also know that to achieve truly community-based solutions, we need to give community organizers the tools they need as well. So we prepared a companion guide for organizers that includes cases in building effective community-guided public processes, such as the Detroit City Council's Green City Task Force. We've also included lots of approaches for recruiting community members to take action for zero waste and building coalitions for zero waste campaigns with useful checklists and how-tos. And if you're an organizer looking to figure out how to get started, you can check out the guide and then reach out to us. And Aditi is actually our go-to person to help organizers build those campaigns on the ground. And we're more than happy to engage with you and help you figure out how to do that. Next slide. Great. So big and broad up there is our website. I want to conclude with encouraging you to check that out. It's at zerowasteworld.org/ZWMP. There you can read the Zero Waste Master Plan and its companion guide for organizers. We encourage you to share it widely and let us know what you think. We also encourage you to sign up for our newsletter to stay up to date on the state of zero waste in the US and Canada. Together, we know we can build a movement for a just transition to zero waste, and we look forward to having all of you join us. So with that concludes my presentation and this awkwardness that I'm feeling at the moment. I would like to next call up Jack Mckibben for his presentation.
Amazing. Thank you, Todd, for the slides. Yes, it's wonderful to be here with everyone today. So thank you so much for the invitation. And yeah, I will just sort of present on the work that we do at Zero Waste Europe, in particular our Zero Waste Cities model, how we apply it locally, and sort of, yeah, I guess the key message is that if I'd ask sort of one person or anyone to take away with them from this presentation is just that the Zero Waste Cities model is actively being applied successfully in a whole wide range of contexts across Europe today, and there's a framework that's sort of tangibly in place. Of course, that's being used across communities, but the key thing is that ensuring this framework is locally tailored towards the different contexts. So yes, I'll get started. So the next slide, please, Todd. So Zero Waste Europe, we are an NGO. I'm based here in Brussels, in Belgium. We are an NGO consisting of 31 members in 24 countries across Europe. Our model is to, being based in Brussels, we advocate and try to sort of secure ambitious waste and circular economy policies at the European Union level. And then, particularly in my role, we support the bottom-up approach whereby we guide and support our members to work with municipalities to yeah, implement these policies at the local level too. Next slide, please. So how do we define zero waste at Zero Waste Europe? And I think this is just a key thing to quickly sort of highlight for the next moment. So the next slide, please, Todd. I think everyone is familiar with the zero waste hierarchy, of course, but for us at Zero Waste Europe, and this is a key part of our Zero Waste Cities commitment, is that this last bit at the bottom here, any city as part of our program must commit to not increasing their capacity or not sort of renewing the sort of increasing the amount that they send to existing residual waste treatment. So how we define these are any treatment that sort of helps to create a lock-in effect for the continued generation of waste. So incineration, waste to energy, landfilling, gasification, etc. So next slide, please. Yes, I'm going to quickly sort of introduce the Zero Waste Cities program. So the next slide, please. How we work with cities and communities, this is really important. The approach and the mantra is that Zero Waste Cities is this continuous effort to phase out waste. So not obviously by burning or landfilling it, instead creating these local systems and implementing them that don't generate waste in the first place. And a key aspect of this philosophy, this vision, is that it's a continuous effort. Whether you are diverting or separately collecting 5% or 50%, 85% of waste, there are still improvements to be made. I think that's the philosophy that we embed within all of our work, and sort of as a key lies at the heart really of our Zero Waste Cities work. So the next slide, please. Great, thank you. So the Zero Waste Europe City Programme that I coordinate, we have nearly 400 European municipalities inside and outside the European Union in 9 different countries who have committed to become zero waste and therefore are being supported to implement ambitious local zero waste strategies. We do this via a network of local and national coordinators via membership. A big part of this is we model and sort of capture the best practices on zero waste, help disseminate and communicate the understanding around this, how these policies were implemented at different starting points. And then we are increasingly collecting sort of all of this expertise and creating an online hub via the Zero Waste Europe Academy. So next slide, please. It's interesting. So I'm going to quickly introduce the master plan that we have here in Europe as well. There are lots of similarities to the great work that's been done by Gaia US. And as a reminder, actually, I should say Zero Waste Europe is the European arm of the Gaia Global as well. It's an important factor as well. So yeah, we've worked in collaboration with Attendees and many others across the world, part of Gaia. But if you go to the next slide, please, Todd, I'll quickly introduce what the Zero Waste Master Plan is. And so it's a long document that you can access online, but it's really a toolkit for people, municipalities, community organizers, waste management professionals starting out on their journey towards zero waste. It provides an introduction as to what actually how do we define zero waste, how does it differ from traditional waste management, sort of in how it links to some of the key topics that we're facing today, climate change, renewable energy, biodiversity, etc. It provides an overview of the current EU waste legislation, the benefits of adopting zero waste, looking at the economic, environmental, social and health benefits that zero waste brings to local communities. And then it also provides a number of different starting scenarios. So in Europe, we see a wide range of different contexts where a municipality will say they're interested, but they're struggling. Where do we begin on this journey? So we provide some sort of guidance and starting points to help municipalities on their way, and then signposting to what the next steps are. So if you go to the next slide, please, Todd. A key part of this, the master plan, is that we have often had this: how do you start on a zero waste plan? If you are a municipality official, there might be interest there, of course, but then what next? It can be so broad. And so I think we've got a number of questions within the master plan. The answers, we believe, help just begin to formalize the structure of what the zero waste strategy would be. So you'll see someone in the presentation here. The answers to this, and we'll begin to define, okay, where are we at now? What's possible? What can we do to start implementing change? What's in our control, and what do we have to influence that's outside of our direct control? So the next slide, please. As I mentioned, we have a number of different starting scenarios for zero waste cities in a range of different contexts, and each scenario has detail about what the typical roadmap is for zero waste for a city to go from to start to being successful, and then also a best practice example of this. So quickly to the next slide, please, Todd. For example, scenario 1 is like very much starting from scratch, low levels of interest, and you'll see if you go to the next slide, please. Scenarios sort of go up whether you're implementing from already quite a high base, if you're recycling a lot, or and you're still willing to, as I mentioned before, this commitment to improve the system, optimize plans. I think that's incredibly important, and we cater for that as well. And then scenario 5 here is also what do we do if you're like for example, somewhere warm and sunny on the Mediterranean? What do you do if you're an island or sort of a tourist destination as well? So next slide, please. Very quickly, this is the basic framework. As I mentioned at the start, what a zero waste city is in terms of how we approach cities, how we use it to structure our work. And then, of course, the exact plans, the details must be embedded within the local context, the reality, using data collected within the community. So very quickly, I'm sure everyone is aware that the need for curbside door-to-door collection of different waste streams is the foundation. Residual waste assessment, so analysing what continues to not be recycled. Is it certain brands, materials? Is it a lot of organics? and therefore you can design educational programs, or you can advocate with businesses or other companies to redesign products using that information. Economic incentives such as pay-as-you-throw to really sort of get from maybe a 60, 50% to the higher percentages to really sort of incentivize and bring the community with you. And of course, public communication awareness is absolutely key. And of course, waste prevention, reusing, repair, and sort of adopting a number of these policies with the broader ecosystem of a local city. The next slide, please. I think I have 1 minute left. So I just want to provide a couple of examples of how it's successfully being implemented. And so it's all well and good me saying this stuff, but it has to, of course, be translated into tangible action on the ground. So if you go to the next slide, I just wanted to introduce one example from a waste management company called Contarina, which serves just under 500,000 within the Treviso region of Italy, or Treviso within the Veneto region includes the city of Treviso too. And you'll see on the left-hand side the average household fee. So not only is zero waste highly successful, but it's also one of the cheapest options, or the cheapest option in the region. And then also there are high recycling rates on the right-hand side, and the residual waste drop on the top right-hand side there. And then final couple of slides, Todd, I see Denise is going to encourage me to wrap up. Just very quickly, so Slovenia as a whole adopted, well, I think a number of municipalities have adopted their zero waste approach via, remember, you'll see in 2008, it was a mid-layer, sort of mid-table region for recycling in the EU. If you go to the next slide, please, Todd, you'll see within 10 years, Slovenia has actually jumped to the top 2 of the European Union, just in terms of recycling, but it's also, you couple this with extremely low waste generation levels. And then finally, if you go to the next slide, please, Todd, you'll see a broad overview of the Slovenian zero waste cities that are in our program. You'll see the volumes that they're separately collecting of waste, and then couple this with the actual low levels of waste reduction, and particularly for the bottom row when you compare this to the European Union average. So yeah, I will stop there. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so impressed that 200 people are up at this early in Pacific time. And yeah, I look forward to answering some questions, hopefully, and listening to the other speakers. Yeah. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jack. There's actually one question that's near the top of the queue right now that I think you're uniquely placed to answer. And so there's a question that asks, what makes a country receptive to engaging? So what have you seen in Europe that's opened that up?
A country, that's interesting. I guess as a country, there are a number of factors. So ultimately, we have the Zero Waste Cities program has had more success, more interest from countries in Central Southern Europe. And this technically, well, 2 main reasons. The first has been the context whereby traditionally these countries haven't had highly industrialized waste systems in the past. So particularly in the early 2000s, 2010s, they haven't been tied to expensive sort of waste incinerators or waste to energy incinerators. And so without that tie-in, that sort of long-term contract, they've actually been able to adopt, design, and implement really impactful and ambitious zero waste strategies as well. So, we have over 300 municipalities in Italy, in Slovenia, Romania, parts of northern Spain as well. So this is a key factor as well. Of course, for a country to be receptive, you need to have communities, organizations, groups who are sort of willing to do the day-to-day work to help raise awareness about zero waste is for citizens, for businesses, but also to municipality officials. And so, yeah, you need to have individuals, organizations who are knowledgeable, confident, and well-resourced. And this is one part within a broader sort of societal change. And I think with many countries, we're seeing that here about people want to change. Their sort of numerous surveys show that they want climate action, they want environmental action. And so using that to channel it towards pushing for regulatory change, legislative change as well.
Great. Thanks, Jack. I'm going to move on to our next speaker. I'm seeing a bunch of really great questions come up in the Q&A, and I'm going to ask you to probably come up again at the end. if we've got time to answer some of those questions. And I think a few of our speakers may actually answer some of the questions that are in the Q&A right now through their presentations. So I'm going to go ahead and move forward with Julie Sandstein. Julie, as soon as you're ready to go, just let me know. We're really excited to have Julie to talk to us about some of the steps that they've been taking in San Diego in implementing zero waste systems.
Thanks, Denise. Hi. Is there an echo for anyone? Okay, no, I just had one. I'm going to try to go through some of these slides quite quickly, but I did want to give kind of a background for people who are not familiar with San Diego, some just unique challenges. So we'll start with the first slide or the next slide. There are 18 cities in our county, the largest of which is San Diego with a population of 1.4 million. So, you know, we are dealing with quite a large city. And we have our own collection system within our department, the Environmental Services Department for the City of San Diego. So we pick up trash, recycling, and organics from about 300,000 homes, but that means the other almost million people, they're serviced by private haulers. The one huge challenge our city has is we are not allowed to charge for that trash pickup from our 300,000 residents. So that could be an entire conference in itself discussing that law, and it's from 1919 and it's just archaic, but long story, it's complicated, and we are still not able to charge. So I don't know when that will change. So moving on, besides our collections division, we also run one of the state's only municipally run landfills. It's called Miramar Landfill. It is in the center of the city. It's quite fascinating and quite impressive with the amount of material that goes in there every day and how it's managed. We have a gas collection system, which runs a facility next door to the landfill. And the next two slides, if you keep going, Todd, there are a couple more slides just to give you a little bit of an idea how a landfill operates. I'd say almost half of our department is actually based out at the landfill. And as a part of that landfill, there's also a 75-acre area, next slide, that is a composting facility called the Greenery. So that's actually trying to divert as much as possible and looking to expand, expand that area as we get closer to more organics diversion with the impending Senate Bill 1383. We'll touch on that a little bit more, and I'm sure many other presentations will as well. Just quickly, the next couple of slides are a couple of bigger local ordinances that we passed, the City Recycling Ordinance back in 2008. And that impacted all of our commercial and multifamily properties, as well as permitted special events. In the same year, we also passed the Construction and Demolition Ordinance. That's the next slide. And again, we've just been enforcing those ordinances we're going on 12 years. So as we got to around 2012, 2013, we did a waste composition study at our landfill, next slide, to see what's still making its way into our landfill. And in this slide, at the bottom is organics, and that's about 40%, and this is similar to national statistics. 40% of what's making its way into our landfill, it's organics. It's all that yard waste and food waste that we're not collecting, we're not diverting, as well as other recyclable materials, as you can see from this slide. So there's still a lot of work to be done. So the next slide shows the ordinances I already mentioned, plus a few more recent ones. So we worked on after the 2008 ordinances and after doing the waste composition study, we started thinking we need to be a little bit stronger here and pass more legislation. So that's when we started working on the zero waste plan. We had come up with versions of a plan back in 2004, 2005. We knew we didn't have the political will to actually pass something. So after the waste comp study in 2012, 2013, that's when we started kind of dusting off the previous zero waste plans, and we started working on a much more robust one. Started meeting with stakeholders, and also politically, we started to realize we think we can now pass something like a zero waste plan. So next slide. When we started meeting with our stakeholders, it was about 2014. Actually, keep going. Next slide. So in this slide, you see the different stakeholders, and it's a very varied group, which was great. We tried to reach everyone we could think of, anyone who might be impacted by greater diversion. And it was very well received. And I think a big reason for that is because we did have multiple stakeholder meetings. We had large ones where anyone could come, tried to schedule them in the evening hours. But then we also had some one-on-one, some smaller group meetings if a specific group or entity asked to meet with us. Sometimes we met with a particular council person and maybe an entity, a group who they wanted to have that discussion with their political leader for their council district in our city. So it was actually really positive. The next slide as well also breaks down the different types of attendees who came to our outreach meetings to discuss, here's what we're proposing in our plan. Here are the diversion numbers we're looking for. And by the time we actually went before City Council in 2015, it had been so well vetted through so many different people that it was really, it actually wasn't a big deal. It was a big deal to us when it passed, but it was really a real win-win. It was of no surprise to anyone. So we were very transparent in the whole process. That doesn't mean to say that, our work was done. It was really kind of beginning even more after the passage of this plan, and trying to really beef up all of our waste diversion programs, as well as trying to find the funding for things, which I'm sure everyone here is, aware of that challenge. So the next slide, I wanted to include, I know Portia, who's going next, will probably really get into the details of this, but it is, it's a very helpful slide from Zero Waste USA. It's just a great checklist, and I think it's been improved over the years. So I would recommend any city, county, state that might be working towards some sort of zero waste diversion plan to refer to this. It's just a really good resource. Next slide. So state laws, which many in the room are aware of, that those who don't live in California, these are some of our larger pieces of legislation. But the one on the bottom, Senate Bill 1383, is clearly our biggest challenge right now, I think, for every jurisdiction throughout the state. We are working on it furiously, not quite sure how we're going to fund this either. But that's just, part of the challenge, right? So to kind of jump back just locally, after the passage of the Zero Waste Plan, which was also, we passed a climate action plan in the same year as the Zero Waste Plan. But the Zero Waste Plan is a big component to the climate action plan. But the climate action plan that's overseen by the Department of Sustainability. So we help out we help out with it, especially when it comes to solid waste. But it's a different department actually over the kind of the umbrella overseeing the city's climate action plan. So as far as our commercial, the organics diversion, you want to jump to the next slide, Todd? So organics diversion, huge, so much progress to be made, but we've really been growing the program over the last, 7, 8, 9 years before we passed the zero waste plan. We have about 80 participants. These are large venues and universities, as well as smaller, working with some of our private haulers. So the haulers are picking up at some of our smaller restaurants, large and smaller restaurants, but trying to increase a lot of that. We can go through the next couple of slides quickly. As far as greater organics diversion, we got an awesome $3 million grant from the state, and it's been extended. It expires next April, and that has allowed us to build a covered aerated composting system at our greenery, at our composting facility. So we're taking in additional food and yard waste. You want to jump to the next 2 slides? Yeah, here's the grant. We worked with a nonprofit, Kitchens for Good. And so we're still working on that. It's a really impressive system out at you see the photos. It's really cool to see it in action. And that's just helping us with greater diversion. Second to last slide is also a polystyrene ordinance we passed. That's currently it's in litigation right now. So we cannot enforce it, but eventually we'll get there. And zero waste was the very last slide. This is what we're working toward. Sorry to go a little over.
That's okay. There were 2 questions that were specific about San Diego. I think you just talked a little bit about how San Diego's waste ordinances are enforced and what the plans are for that. And there was a question, I know you talked a lot about commercial, food collection and composting, but somebody is wondering if there's a plan to do residential collection as well, and if that will be required.
To answer the second question, there is a plan to do residential because that is actually a part of Senate Bill 1383. It will be required that we pick up food waste from people's homes. We would love to offer that right now, but one of our biggest obstacles is the fact that residents do not pay for it. So that's been challenging for years. It's not just because of 1383. So we will be offering that. I just don't know when. But we have been working on this for quite a while, trying to figure out how do we make sure we're in compliance with this law but we don't have the funding for it. It's a monumental task, and it's very, it's multi-departments. It's not just, our group or just our department. So we are working on it. And I'm sorry, what was the first question?
It was about enforcement and higher enforcing.
Oh, so we have a whole enforcement team. They currently enforce our recycling ordinance, our construction and demolition ordinance. We will be adding even more code enforcement officers just for the enforcement of 1383. And they also help with enforcing a lot of the requirements that we have with our franchised haulers.
Thanks so much, Julie.
Thank you.
We've got next up Portia, who's going to talk about some of Zero Waste USA's checklist and some of the other things that they're putting in place. So while she's coming up on stage, one of the most popular questions in the Q&A is about pay-as-you-throw policy and how we can ensure that low-income families that cannot afford low-waste products not get penalized. I think this is an interesting question, and it actually, we could delve into this for quite some time, but I think what it really speaks to is this idea, when we talk about environmental justice, we are also talking about racial and economic justice. And so a lot of the systems that we currently have in place are sort of set up to penalize low-income folks. and communities of color because they don't have these other alternatives available. And so when we talk about zero waste planning, we are looking to build in local systems and local to address this. And then in addition to that, we recognize very much that there's an entire system of corporations that basically create these packages that create lots of waste. And we want, so our targeting at Gaia, we do a couple of things. We do work with local communities to build in new systems, but we're also participating in efforts against, to get corporate campaigns, we launch corporate campaigns to help shift those corporations away from all of this like single-use packaging and all of these things that actually create products and then package them in ways that create low waste systems or make more reuse and refill stations available in local communities. And we're definitely pushing for that as well. We see all of that as one giant system that we're trying to address. And in some places where we've seen things like bag bans being put in place and charges for either paper or plastic bags at the register, we've seen some cities putting in place like systems where people who are either on SNAP programs or other food assistance programs don't get charged for those kinds of bags. And that's one way that we're in the meantime able to address those issues and then also make available reusable bags for those communities for free. So those are just a couple of examples. I see Portia's ready to go. I don't want to take up any more of her time. So Portia, as soon as you're ready and your slides are up, feel free to go ahead and start. There we go.
Hi, everybody. It's very nice to see you today, kind of see you. Next slide. So this deck is quite long, and so I'm going to be skipping some things, and so I want to encourage you to check it out. It'll be posted tomorrow morning on the program page for today. So Zero Waste USA, which is also Grassroots Recycling Network, we renamed ourselves in 2014 to better accurately address what our favorite topic that we work on, which is zero waste. We are the US affiliate of the Zero Waste International Alliance and share many people on both boards. Next slide. So today I'm going to talk to you about 8 steps to becoming a zero waste community, how to change the culture. I am going to address the toolkit, but I'm actually going to go pretty fast, and I encourage you to look at the PowerPoint and to check out our website. And then I would like us to spend some time on lifestyle. So first, I want to ground the conversation with the Zero Waste International Alliance's international definition of zero waste. And I'm not going to read it to you. I'm going to let you read it yourself. So I'm just going to be quiet for a moment. Next slide. I wanted to point out that we're currently working on a zero waste declaration. And I know it's too small for you to read, but if you make the screen larger, you'll see that it starts with the first zero waste day was 50 years ago. Recycling, the natural industrial child, was envisioned to complete the resource guide, save the wilderness, generate jobs, and build the back end of the gross national product all at once. And this was written initially by Rick Anthony, and it's been moving through a number of different organizations, and it's posted on the Zero Waste USA website. I encourage you to read it and plan in the near future to sign on to it. I want to point out that it starts with centering on equity in the point that a zero waste world must be a just world. Next slide. So next slide. So the document I'm going to show you is actually one of the most favorite documents in all of our classes and projects. It's called 8 Steps to Becoming a Zero Waste Community. It comes in 2 forms. There's a 2-pager and then there's a 13-pager. But basically it's designed to allow a community to kind of figure out where they're going and where they can go next. it nods right at the top that not all communities are not the same and that it's going to be different for different communities. If you're a small town on the East Coast with a person who wears multiple hats and recycling and zero waste is just one of them, you would approach it differently than a well-staffed, large city with many environmental initiatives. But this system is designed so that you can enter at any spot and apply it to yourself. And it sort of lays things out in a nice, neat manner. It's actually kind of boring to talk to you about it, so I'm just going to encourage you. The document's not boring, but explaining it is boring. I encourage you to check it out on our website. Next slide. So I want to give you an example, and I live in Sonoma County, California, and as you know, we've been suffering from quite a few fires and floods over the last few years. Next slide. I want to introduce you to an effort that Leslie Lukash led in 2018. It's a project of the local task force for solid waste. Each county has to have one of these committees. Some are more active than others. Ours is quite active. And out of the local task force came a project, coincidentally also called task force. But we brought people from the community, maybe 40, 50 people together, and developed a zero waste initiative. Leslie was the lead on it. I had the honor to being one of the major authors and editors with Leslie. But I want to point out to you that it's actually a pretty simple thing. Basically, we asked, next slide. We gave specifics, suggested initiatives, and we also provided a number of resources. And out of this effort came quite a large result. We now have the Waste Management Agency has been renamed Zero Waste Sonoma, and the every city is addressing it one way or another. There's much more cohesive efforts in regards to solid waste. It was quite an important document, and kudos to Leslie and the team, many of which are pictured right there. I recommend, I'm writing a case study on this. I haven't finished it, but it will be out there, and I will be addressing the 8 steps and how they apply here. This is something that you can take and replicate in your community. It's simple, straightforward, and very understandable. It's designed to be easily digested by elected decision makers, even those that are not familiar with the topic. Next slide. So one of the major differences between zero waste planning and solid waste planning is that you make concerted effort right at the start, next slide, to recruit public policy champions as well as local leaders in business groups as well as other institutions. Next slide. And our goal, your goal, is to engage all stakeholders. We're not talking about a half-hearted effort to say, oh yeah, we sent an email to all of the recycling centers and we'll see if they come. We're talking about a concerted effort to make sure that everybody who's interested in this topic feels engaged from the start and gets involved from the start. So the end result is something that they own and care about and feel supportive of. Now in Los Angeles, I wasn't involved in this project, but in Los Angeles, they held somewhere in the neighborhood of 100 meetings to move to people, to engage people and move them through the process of developing the zero waste plan. Now, not all communities can do that, but all communities can hold meetings. They can brief people. Oh gosh, 3 minutes. Next slide. So I'm going to move through this fast, but we want you to build constituencies, show movies, have talks. This is the San Diego Zero Waste Symposium, which has been replicated in many communities where once a year people get together and talk about where they are in regards to zero waste. Next slide. You green the schools. Next slide. You can move fast, Todd. You organize zero waste activities and events. Next slide. Now, we're not going to have enough time for us to sufficiently address zero waste lifestyles, but it is a grand part of this PowerPoint. But actually, it's just fine for us to stop here and address diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice, which is such an important part of any zero waste planning process, that you have to honor the workers, both the front of the house and the back of the house, and that you need to address their issues. We need to make sure that the people who are providing services to us in this manner are safe, secure, well-paid, that's debatable, paid a living wage, and are not being taken advantage of. In many communities, the people sorting our trash and our recyclables are temporary employees who have no rights. No rights is the wrong word. They have no benefits. One fellow I met had worked for 15 years at a facility and was still making minimum wage. In my opinion, that's disgusting, and I hope in your opinion as well. There's 35 seconds left. Next. These are the toolkits these are some of the tools that Julie referenced earlier. They're on our website. They're in this PowerPoint. Many people have found them invaluable. Next slide. Here's the checklist. It's a list of 3 pages broken out by sector and by programs, policy programs and facilities. And I can encourage you to check it out. It's a great way to sort of see where you're at. Next slide. This is a subsequent file where you figure out, okay, what are we missing? What materials need to be addressed? Next slide. And this is a food discards version of the checklist. It's in draft form, but it is available. One more slide. Or 2, and next slide. This is the divertibility analysis. I'll just say that you can enter your information in there and gain a great deal of valuable data, as well as graphs that suit your purposes for communicating your goals to your community. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Portia. I know one of the things that we wanted to talk about today was about how lifestyle changes fit into all of this. Could you just touch on that for a minute, and then we're gonna switch to Q&A from the audience. And so while you're answering that question, I'm going to ask the other panelists to come up on stage.
Sure. So zero waste lifestyle is a very important aspect of moving a community towards zero waste. First of all, we're all individuals before we're employees or decision makers or parts of groups. So we all live somewhere. We all have to deal with our waste. And introducing concepts. Todd, could you give me the second to the last slide? Introducing our concepts to the community as what you can do at home is an excellent way to start people in the right direction and give them an idea. Here we go. This here in front of you is some checklists that individuals can do that is also on our website. This is another very popular item because it tells people what they can do at home. So they're introduced to the concepts, they pick a few they can do, they get their feet wet, and then they see an ad for an event and they think, oh, zero waste. So they're introduced to the concept. So we have to affect people where they live as well as where they work, as well as make decisions. And it's highly important. And the part that you didn't get to see lists a number of lifestyle mavens, people promoting zero waste at home, including some women of color because they feel somewhat left out of the zero waste world. And I just encourage you to take a look at the material that I didn't get to give you. Thank you.
Thank you, Portia. Hopefully I'm not echoing. I just heard an echo. One of the most popular questions that's come up during our session is about anaerobic digestion. So the question says, can you explain why a process like anaerobic digestion wouldn't be above landfill disposal since the waste is being used to produce renewable energy? I'm hoping, Jack, because you talked about the waste hierarchy, you can address that question. And then I've got a question for everybody to close us out.
Yeah, thanks, Denise. So just to clarify, anaerobic digestion would be above landfilling in the waste hierarchy. Apologies for any confusion, but it's still ultimately below the priority, which is composting as close to the source of like waste generation as possible. That's the priority. Local composting, community composting, or if not, larger scale sort of city composting. So yes, and I think there are a great Zaria paper about anaerobic digestion and composting that maybe we can share a link to after this in the chat, that just sort of compares the both systems and why composting remains a priority over anaerobic digestion in terms of costs, ensuring that the outputs get put back towards farmlands and soils. Like, for example, in the EU, the European Union Commission requires that aerobic digestion can only be sort of counted as recycling if the sort of material that's produced is gone back to the soil and to different farmlands. So yes, we can share that paper as well, but just to clarify, it's one step above landfilling, of course, because there is some capture for energy, potential for energy capture, but in terms of costs, energy efficiency, it's still lower down in the hierarchy than much better, more prioritized solutions such as composting.
Thanks, Jack. I know Zero Waste Europe is also doing a lot of really great work on tying different elements of waste reduction to climate policy and greenhouse gas emissions. And composting is a key solution to addressing both waste and climate emissions. And so I think anaerobic digestion is going to keep coming up in the policy questions, as well as like for city levels, how are we dealing with this? Is it a solution or not? And I think we're going to be all encountering a lot of really, really important questions. So thank you for clarifying that. One of the questions that came up in the Q&A that I saw was about why do we talk about zero waste and frame our solutions as zero waste instead of waste reduction? And I think this is really important as cities are approaching, what to do with their programs, how to set them up, what to call them. And I wanted to give each person an opportunity to answer that question. Why do we talk about it as a zero waste system and not a waste reduction system? I'm going to start with Julie on this one.
Yeah, I'll go first. I guess waste reduction, it is a tool to get to zero waste. We obviously can't get to zero waste without everyone doing some pretty massive reductions. For us, when we passed the plan, it was, I guess like the zero waste title, it seems it's kind of neat and tidy. It's easy, it slides off the tongue, and that's the ultimate goal. For us, our goal is getting to zero waste by 2040. We have to see where we are in the coming years, and do we make adjustments to it? But I know there are some counties I've seen that they don't have their essential zero waste plan. I think they do use the title reduction or something similar. So I guess I just think of waste reduction as that's how you eventually do get to the ultimate goal of zero waste.
Portia, you want to answer that question quick?
Julie did a good job, but I'd like to add that in some ways the phrase isn't that important. What's important is the goal, and for some communities, they choose not to use the word zero waste. Other people prefer high diversion. High diversion focuses then on recycling and not enough on waste reduction. So there are nuances, and different phrases work for different communities, but what's important is what the goal is. Also, let's say a community is not comfortable saying zero waste when they're at 35% diversion. Whereas as they get up toward 80 and 90, maybe they'd be more comfortable. Maybe it's a process. In some communities, they're doing so well, they don't feel they need to go through the process. Because, you know, zero waste actually alienates. It's interesting that Julie thinks it's nice and tidy, because we used to get in big fights about it about 15 years ago. And even now people say, zero's impossible. How can you possibly get to zero? But the truth is, do you say that when companies have zero accidents goals, or you want to have zero debt in your life? You know, it's just, it's visionary, and the emphasis is on the process. And I do believe the phrase zero waste has gotten much wider acceptance. Jack?
Yeah, I think Jack could speak to that from Zero Waste Europe.
I mean, yeah, just to echo the great points by Julie and Portia, I think when we talk about zero waste, we're talking about transitioning the system as a whole towards one that's more circular. We're not just sort of looking to tweak or slightly amend or reduce the impact. We're actually looking to completely transform the way we produce, consume products, the way we work as communities, our supply chain. So absolutely, it's critical for us to sort of have that vision, and it's much more, it's this process, it's this journey whereby you need to bring the community with you. It places community members at the heart of decision making and of sort of decentralizing powers away from regional, national authorities into the hands of local authorities too. So it's much bigger than just sort of looking at reducing our waste. It's systems-wide approach too.
Great, thanks so much, Jack. And I know from, you know, as our over at Gaia in the US, we certainly agree with the framing and have this conversation a lot, but we did name an entire master plan, our zero waste master plan. And we think it's really important to put that vision and goal into the title of what we're aiming for. So I want to thank all of our panelists for joining us today. And I know Gary is waiting. I just wanted to add one note. There are a lot of really great questions in the Q&A that we didn't get to, but I want folks to know, like, if you're interested in hearing more about environmental justice and social justice and zero waste planning, there's a great session on environmental justice later today that you could join. There were some questions about recycling and systems change that we mentioned before, and there's some panels. There's a panel tomorrow during the National Policy Town Halls that covers both the platform from Break Free from Plastic and what we're talking about in terms of corporate campaigning, as well as a concurrent session on organics and zero waste, if that was one of your questions. And then there's, for folks who are really wanting to dig in more on recycling, there's a great session on single-use plastics and recycling as well. So I'm sorry we weren't able to get to all of those questions today, but there are some really great deep dive panels for you later today and tomorrow if you wanted to dig into those. And with that, I think our panelists can leave the stage and Gary can take over.
Great suggestions, Denise, for catching up on that. And let's give a great round of applause for all that wonderful information. It was amazing to hear about this from Europe and US and what is happening. We're about to go into our break. We're sorry we didn't get to ask more of the questions in the last panel, but we'll get back on schedule now with our break at 10 o'clock Pacific time. The exhibitors are on floors 1 and 2. To get to the second floor, use the elevator on the left. Table topics are on floors 1, 2, and 3. Next couple of slides in a second will show you what's on the different floors. And for networking, we want you to just connect with people by hovering your cursor over the avatars, the little circles with people's pictures in them, or search for their names in chat. You can keep talking after the break if you get going on a really great message by using the side banner to jump to the networking room, and that's on the right side of your screen. Next slide. The exhibitors are on the first floor are Paint Care, Waxy, Green Mountain Technology, Mattress Recycling, and the National Recycling Coalition. On the second floor is Bush Systems, Retract Connect, Strategic Materials, Zanka Recycling, Mobius Intelligent Systems, and the Zero Waste Campus Council. Next slide. We really encourage you to get to all those exhibitors to learn what they have to offer in terms of products and services. For table topics, on the first floor are cities lobbying for zero waste, litigation for zero waste, chemical recycling, extended producer responsibility in Europe, food scrap composting, and training for zero waste jobs. On the second floor is reduction ordinances, extended producer responsibility and product stewardship, climate and zero waste, community-based composting, national town halls, and right bin specifications. So those are them. We're going to go into the exhibit mode now and back here at 10:30. Thank you.